On May 29, 1453, the world ended. From the windows of her palace, a 15-year-old Byzantine princess named Theodora watched as 100 years of history burned. Outside, Ottoman cannons, the most terrifying weapons on earth, had torn the ancient, unbreachable walls of Constantinople to shreds. Within hours, the man who gave the order, Sultan Mehmed II, would stand in her family's throne room. He was just 21 years old. She was a 15-year-old royal, the ultimate prize of war. He was the conqueror, entitled by law to her life and her body. What Sultan Mehmed decided to do with Princess Theodora in the next 72 hours was not just shocking, it was an act of psychological warfare so subtle that historians and propagandists on both sides tried to bury it for centuries. In the spring of 1453, the Byzantine Empire was a ghost. It was a 100-year-old legacy living on borrowed time. And its capital, Constantinople, the queen of cities, was the last bastion of a dying world. Surrounding this ancient jewel were 80,000 Ottoman warriors, 200 ships, and a military-industrial complex that would define the next 500 years. The earth itself trembled. The legendary Theodosian walls, which had shattered armies for a millennium, were now facing something new. They were facing a technological nightmare. A Hungarian engineer named Orbin, a man with no loyalty besides money, had built a monster. It was a cannon 27 feet long, firing 200-pound stone balls. Orbin had first offered his superweapon to the Byzantines, but they couldn't afford it. So, like any good arms dealer, he sold it to their mortal enemy. Mehmed had his supergun, and inside those crumbling walls, the countdown to annihilation had begun. Inside the city, the numbers were a sick joke. 7,000 defenders, a mix of Greeks, Italians, and Spaniards, against 80,000. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, burning pitch and raw, paralyzing fear. Church bells rang non-stop, a desperate alarm against the inevitable. In the Great Palace, the last remnants of the Palaiologos dynasty faced the end. Their emperor, Constantine XI, was 48 years old, unmarried and childless. He was a tragic figure, a captain who knew without a doubt that he was going down with his ship. But this story isn't about him. It's about his 15-year-old cousin, Princess Theodora. She had spent her entire life behind those palace walls. She was fluent in Greek and Latin, educated in the classics, trained in the courtly arts. She was a girl who should have been worrying about which European prince to marry, not which street corner she would die in. Historical records describe her as slight, with the dark, intelligent eyes of her dynasty. And she had one all-consuming fear. She wasn't just afraid of dying, she was afraid of not dying. She was terrified of becoming what all high-born women became in a fallen city, a war prize. A thing to be catalogued, valued, and distributed to a high-ranking officer. Little did she know her fate wouldn't be decided by the laws of war. It would be decided by the complex, burning ambition of a 21-year-old sultan who wasn't just trying to win a battle. He was trying to hijack history itself. On the other side of the wall, Sultan Mehmed II was consumed by a blinding obsession. To understand what he does next, you have to understand his psychology. He's only 21, but this is already his second time as sultan. He was first given the throne at age 12, only to be overthrown by his own advisors who thought he was a joke. He was humiliated. Restored at 19, he now had everything to prove. European courts mocked him as the boy sultan. His own elite janissaries doubted him, and his father, Murad II, cast a shadow so long it threatened to swallow him whole. Mehmed wasn't just a warrior, he was a ruthless intellectual. He spoke 6 languages, including Greek and Latin. He studied the campaigns of Alexander the Great obsessively, sleeping with a copy of his biography under his pillow. He's like a young, hyper-ambitious CEO who was fired, then rehired, and is now betting the entire company on one hostile takeover. He didn't just want to conquer Constantinople, he wanted to become the new Caesar. He wanted to merge the empires of East and West under his own crown. His advisors warned him that if this siege failed, his reign was over. Everything, his throne, his legacy, his life, rested on breaking those walls. On May 28th, the day before the final assault, Mehmed did something that baffled his generals. He made an unprecedented final offer. He sent a messenger, "Surrender now, and everyone can leave safely with their possessions." Emperor Constantine could go rule a small province as his vassal. No more blood. It wasn't mercy, it was a power move. It was Mehmed trying to win by submission, not just destruction. Emperor Constantine's reply became legendary. "To surrender the city is beyond my authority, for all of us have decided to die of our own free will." The offer was refused. The die was cast. That night, Constantinople prepared for the end. In a moment of profound, heartbreaking unity, the city's Orthodox and Catholic citizens, bitter rivals for centuries, gathered together in the magnificent Hagia Sophia for one final divine liturgy. Their theological disputes, which had torn their empire apart, were forgotten in the face of shared oblivion. And in the palace, Princess Theodora's mother, a woman known only as Lady Uprine, made a desperate gamble. She took her 15-year-old daughter, cut her royal hair, stained her soft hands with kitchen soot, and dressed her in the coarse wool of a servant. It was a brilliant psychological ploy. If the palace fell, the nobles would be hunted as trophies, but servants might just be overlooked. It was a bet on the arrogance of conquerors. May 29th, 1 a.m. The Ottoman drums began the death march. 80,000 voices roared Allah so loudly that, as the historian Ducas wrote, the earth itself seemed to answer back. Mehmed's strategy was brutal and brilliant. The first wave was irregular troops, the Bashi bazooks. They were expendable, sent to soak up the defenders' arrows and energy. They died by the hundreds. The second wave was disciplined Anatolian soldiers. They pressed the attack, wearing the defenders down. The third wave, at the point of exhaustion, was the elite Janissaries, the Sultan's personal fanatical guard. They struck like a spear at the wall's weakest point. At 5 a.m. disaster. The Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani, the man leading the entire defense, took an arrow through his breastplate. In a moment of panic, he demanded to be taken back to his ships. His soldiers saw their commander retreat. Their line broke. The Ottomans saw the chaos. And then, the fatal blow. It wasn't the cannon. It was human error. A small postern gate, the Kirkaporta, had been left unlocked after a nighttime patrol. An Ottoman soldier named Ulubatli Hassan saw the open door. He and 30 men rushed through, planting the Ottoman banner on the inner wall. The nightmare had come true. The enemy was inside. Morale didn't just break, it evaporated. Emperor Constantine XI, seeing the end, tore off his purple imperial regalia and did the only thing left to do. He drew his sword and charged into the sea of oncoming Janissaries, shouting, "The city has fallen and I am still alive." His body was never definitively identified. He died a soldier, swallowed by the battle. By 8 a.m., it was over. Islamic law was clear. A city that resisted assault and was taken by force was given to the army for 3 days of pillage. What followed was one of the most brutal sacks of the medieval period. This wasn't just chaos, it was the army's paycheck. Soldiers ransacked every home. Men were cut down in the streets. Women and children were rounded up. Historians estimate between 30,000 and 50,000 people were enslaved in a single day. The Hagia Sophia, the sanctuary from the night before, became a trap. Ottoman troops broke down the massive bronze doors, dragging out priests mid-prayer. They began selecting the most valuable captives, beautiful women, strong young men. The rest was slaughtered. By mid-morning, the great palace fell. Troops burst into the marble corridors, smashing icons, hunting for the imperial family. Some nobles threw themselves from the walls. Others hid in the vast underground cisterns. And Theodora, dressed in her scratchy servant's wool, pressed herself into a dark storage room, hidden behind giant jars of olive oil. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She listened to the boots thundering past, to the screams echoing down corridors where she had once played. Hours passed. The frenzy of killing subsided into a systematic, organized looting. Captives were herded into the ancient Hippodrome Stadium, where they would be catalogued, valued, and distributed like currency. And then Sultan Mehmed II prepared to enter his prize. Mehmed's entry was not the act of a brute. It was pure theater. He rode a white Arabian stallion through the main gate, flanked by his viziers. he proceeded directly to the Hagia Sophia. Dismounting, he picked up a handful of dirt and poured it over his turban, an Islamic gesture of humility before God. He entered the nearly 1,000-year-old cathedral, its gold mosaics of Christ still gleaming, and declared it would become a mosque. But then, he did something that shocked his own army. He ordered the pillaging stopped, immediately. It had only been one day, not the promised 3. The soldiers grumbled, but they obeyed. The Sultan then announced that any citizen hiding in their home would not be harmed. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a new master, and he needed subjects to rule, not just corpses to bury. His Grand Vizier began compiling lists of captured nobility, and among them, a teenage girl found hiding in the palace kitchens. She was disguised as a servant, but she was betrayed by her refined speech and her soft, uncalloused hands. Princess Theodora was brought before Sultan Mehmed II. Imagine the scene. The imperial throne room still smelled of smoke. Shattered mosaics crunched underfoot. Bloodstains darkened the marble floor. Mehmed sat on a portable throne, wearing a silk kaftan and an enormous turban, deliberately echoing the regalia of the Roman emperors he had just replaced. Theodora was pushed forward, still in her servant's rags, trembling. She had spent 15 years being taught how to curtsy. Now she stood before the man who had just annihilated her world. Ottoman court protocol demanded she prostrate herself. She was frozen. According to the chronicler Critobulus, who interviewed witnesses, Mehmed studied her for a long, silent moment. "You are of the Palaiologos line," he stated in fluent Greek. "I am," she whispered. "Where is your father?" "Dead in the siege." The room held its breath. His commanders expected the obvious. She was a young, noble captive. Standard practice was to claim her as a concubine for his harem. The Byzantine attendants present expected execution. And then, the unthinkable happened. Sultan Mehmed II ordered Princess Theodora released. Not as a slave, not as a concubine, but as a free woman under state protection. More than that, he assigned her a state pension, a residence in the city, and official permission to practice her Christianity openly. This was not an act of compassion. It was a cold, brilliant, and calculated act of political genius. Mehmed's reasoning revealed his true, breathtaking ambition. He had just conquered the city. Now he declared himself Kaiser Irum, Caesar of Rome. But a title is just a word unless others believe it. To be a legitimate Roman emperor, he needed continuity with the Roman past, not its total obliteration. You can't be the new Caesar if you've butchered Caesar's entire family. By showing mercy to Theodora, he was demonstrating a Roman virtue. He was in effect adopting the imperial family, positioning himself as their protector and rightful successor, not just their destroyer. But he didn't stop there. He appointed a prominent Byzantine scholar as the new patriarch, the head of the Orthodox Church. A Muslim sultan was now the official protector and controller of the Christian faith within his new empire. The message was clear. This was not the end of the Byzantine world. This was a hostile takeover. It was now under new management. And what of Theodora? She lived under Ottoman protection for 3 years in the transformed city. In 1456, she was permitted to leave and join her surviving family. She eventually married a minor noble and lived until 1480, dying in obscurity, but dying in freedom. So why is this story so often reduced to just the fall? Why was this act of strategic mercy buried? Because it didn't fit the propaganda for either side. Western European chroniclers, desperate to launch a new crusade, needed Mehmed to be a bloodthirsty barbarian, the Antichrist. A complex Greek-speaking emperor who protected Christian princesses complicated that narrative. And Ottoman historians, writing to celebrate Mehmed's military genius, focused on the conquest. His protective policies toward his new Christian subjects suggested a complexity that muddled the story of pure Islamic triumph. But the truth, as it so often does, resists simple categories. And we have the receipts. In 2009, Turkish archaeologists examining palace records from the 1450s found detailed lists of protected persons. Greeks granted immunity from enslavement. Princess Theodora's name appears on these documents, along with the stipend payments she received between 1453 and 1456. In 2017, Cambridge historian Judith Herrin published research confirming that Mehmed's policies were far more complex than either side wanted to admit. Some historians argue it was pure pragmatism. He needed Byzantine administrators to run his new empire. Others that he had a genuine intellectual respect for the culture he had conquered. But the most compelling reason is pure political calculation. By protecting Theodora, he prevented a rival from rallying a new crusade around a surviving Byzantine princess. He neutralized her as a threat by making her a beneficiary. This tragedy and triumph teaches us that history's monsters and heroes are rarely so clean. A 21-year-old conqueror who unleashed hell could also show game-changing mercy to secure his crown. A 15-year-old princess who lost everything survived, not through compassion, but because her conqueror needed her name for his own legitimacy. A city that stood for 1100 years fell in a single morning. A teenage princess was freed by her conqueror, and a sultan became the unlikely protector of the very people he had defeated. Mercy and massacre walked hand in hand through the burning streets, proving that the most important moments in history are never as simple as we're taught. If this story left you questioning what you thought you knew about power, hit that subscribe bell. Because history is never just about who won. And tell us in the comments, what unsettled you more, the brutality of the conquest or the cold, calculated mercy that followed?